Have you felt lost, lonely, or maybe even a little bit loony? I talk about all these things on my show and how to help them. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Mental Melodies. I'm your host here, Carmynn Bradley. It is almost Valentine's Day, so love is in the air and there's lots of chocolate. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Not a chocolate entirely, but like health and autonomy over my health and the choices that I'm making. And I guess there are some things I did talk about last week that I felt like I could kind of piggyback off of. And one of those specifically was this idea of depression. And I had mentioned last week that I had like woken up depressed. And I was kind of toying with this idea that, if I woke up a certain way, I could lean into it for a minute, let myself feel what I needed to feel and then get going. But I also talked about moments and how there are, there are moments in time that are very short. And I think usually when we think of the word moment, we think of a very short period of time, like a second or whatever. But there's also moments that create memories, like one whole day with your family or something. And then I think there are also moments that can extend for a very long time. And so while I do believe that the more I learn about like my body's cues or my mind's cues to things like depression or mental illness, the more I can, beat them head on or whatever. I do think that I was kind of stuck in more of a long-term moment than I was willing to, not maybe willing to admit, but also even just that I was aware of, because last week I was feeling pretty good after, I gave myself that morning. But there is kind of a shift that happened in the last couple of years for me, which was something that was very unexpected because, as I've mentioned before, in my journey to healing, I had found yoga, and it had started back in like 2013, 2014 even when I first found it, and then it was a very slow rolling ball. But eventually it picked up quite a lot of momentum. And it was in 2019 that I signed up to be a yoga teacher, and I went through this whole training. And even prior to that, I had already begun incorporating yoga into my life. And yoga at that time was what most people think of when they think of yoga. It was a lot of stretching. It was a lot of body work. But it was more than just that. It was the practice of embodiment. And it was a lot of developing of feelings that I needed about my body. I've mentioned multiple times my struggle with an eating disorder, or multiple eating disorders, disordered eating. You can call it disordered eating when you are like acknowledging it on your own, and I think that's a more healthy way of identifying it anyway. Yes, I did have all of the check the boxes things that you need to be assigned this title of an anorexic, which I actually wanted back at that time because it validated, I guess, what I was going through. But I think a lot of people have disordered eating, even if they don't meet all of those boxes. And so we can talk about how to heal from that without having to even like dive into what would that mean for, insurance purposes or whatever. I'm going on a bunch of like little tangents in my mind, but the gist is that, I was talking about those moments in time that are longer. And what had happened in the last couple years is that I got kind of steered off course, where I had been doing yoga every day, and yoga began to evolve. Like I said in the very beginning, it was mostly just stretching and embodiment, but then it became a practice in meditation. Even my reading was kind of lumped in with that, and it started to become kind of a religion for me. It was a way for me to see the world. There were values and beliefs that I just definitely aligned with, and so it helped kind of carry me through a lot of existential crisis that I was going through, having talked about growing up in like a Christian household and then not really knowing what that was going to mean for me. Yoga kind of really just supported me. Like there's so much to choose from in yoga, and like I said, it's not just like the body. So anyway, I was rolling forward with that. Like yoga was becoming my identity. That was kind of like all I did outside of work other than sing. And I became a yoga teacher. I eventually became a therapist, which incorporated all of this, and all of that is kind of also what led me here, which most of you, I think, know at this point. But in all of the life stuff that happened in the last couple years, and then in stepping away from being a counselor, I ended up like losing what we call in the yoga world our practice. And for a lot of people in the yoga world, it either means like meditating in the morning for a certain amount of time, or doing those stretches for a certain amount of time, whatever it is, however it is that you are incorporating these practices in your life to support like the growth of your health, And I had lost that. And I've talked a lot about like consistency. And so that I have been in the last year pretty consistent about like going to the gym a few days a week, but I haven't been stretching. I haven't been really focusing on eating healthy either, which is, again, it was like weird for me to come to this realization where I was like, okay, while yes, there are a lot of things moving forward for me, I've got a lot of balls rolling, like mostly in my career, I was starting to feel that I was kind of like forsaking my body and forsaking my health, and I didn't know how to like incorporate that back in, because for so long it felt easy, like I had got the ball rolling and it was just so easy for me to jump into that practice. And so now I'm learning again about like how to incorporate more than one thing into my life. And I think this is a theme I've mentioned before, where it's like, you have all these plates that you're juggling. And I have had the habit of juggling too many plates for most of my life. And so in the past 6 months, I would say adding in like more consistent than just this like maintenance of I'm going a few days a week, or even one day a week, just to say that I went. I wanted to start to actually get the ball rolling on going maybe 5 days a week, or getting up in the morning and moving. And specifically, I'm trying to like rid myself of some negative habits that I have. And so like in the last week, I've noticed that I was just kind of sitting in bed for an hour before getting up, and being aware that I'm like half awake and, kind of drifting back in and drifting out. And I'm sure we can all like relate to this as a habit. But I was talking to my sister, and she was giving me a story about her and her partner. And she said something like, one time my partner just said, I don't want to be jealous. And he stopped feeling jealous. And I thought that was so powerful, because I do believe that we do have the power to be able to shift that quickly. It usually doesn't happen that quickly. And I've talked about this on the show. Like once you make a decision, you're stepping forward, you're going to get all these different tests to see like if you really want what you want, and if you're really going to decide to move forward in these healthy habits, all of those things. It's like I'm getting an image of the Pilgrim's Progress, which again, like I've talked about how literature is just it's our world's way of conceptualizing like basically the task we're given once we're born, then we turn 18 and we have to go off and support ourselves. And it's like we didn't choose to be here, and yet we still have, this task where we have to be a human, and we have to interact with other people, and we have to live in society, and we can't choose to just like surrender and lay back. But I think there's beauty in choosing hard in a different way, so anyway, that really hit me what my sister had said, because I've basically been this, I don't want to label myself as a lazy person, but in a lot of ways I've been lately, which I know people from the outside in don't see me that way, because they see all the things that I have been working on, and that is like coming to fruition. But specifically in this one category about like my health, I have just kind of been ignoring my body. And this is another moment I feel like I've come to, which I've come to this moment before on this show, where I just realized like it's important for me to practice what I preach. So if I'm saying like you're experiencing these symptoms, you can heal them on your own, then I should be doing that also. And I guess I usually talk about that from a mental illness perspective. Like I've said, if you have, well, I guess I've said too, if you have, physical ailments, you can often heal them psychologically. Oh yeah, so I guess on the flip side, then like if you have psychological ailments, you can also heal them physically. And I think there's this symbiotic relationship between our mind and body that maybe I'm like finally clarifying right now for all of us. Because I think that it's kind of like a chicken or the egg sort of thing, because I've talked about, one of the symptoms of mental illness being like firing thoughts. And I've mentioned that like I experience those. And so I've again been learning learning that lesson in the last week about what is the source of that. Like if I notice that I have all these thoughts that I don't need to have, just like anxious thoughts or paranoid thoughts or thoughts about the future that are not productive, where I'm like too taken away from the moment, then what is the antidote to that? And while much of what I've been emphasizing lately has been in childhood trauma, like go deep, find out where it started, get that out of your body, blah, blah, blah. I think there's power also in acknowledging that we continue to experience things that can cause symptoms, you know? And so it's not always that the source of it is from your childhood. And maybe even if it is, you can still do things to make yourself feel better without having to constantly go back and drudge up old stuff. And so I'm just been, again, kind of conceptualizing what that looks for me right now. And it's been in the making, I guess, since last year, and when I had started talking about kind of like New Year's stuff on the last episode of 2024, I had already been thinking about these things, and I talked a lot about the importance of a morning routine and a nightly routine, and I had been struggling with what that should look like for me. And I think I'm finally getting there, which it's so interesting how timing works out, because it was just the Chinese New Year. And I was talking to my friends about how that felt much more like a new year than the actual New Year's did. And I've mentioned multiple times in the last few weeks just about this resistance that I have during the winter to kind of move forward. So I'm reminded of what I was saying just a few minutes ago about how I need to be honest with myself, because I could totally lean into that, where I'm intellectualizing something and I'm making something make sense for me in order to stay comfortable. So it's like I keep telling myself it's winter, like you can continue to eat unhealthy things and you can continue to stay in bed. But then there's this other side of me that's like, well, you have control over it. And if you're feeling like your body needs to move a little more than you've been moving, then it's time to get up and start moving. And so I guess I'm reminded now of this image of motivation, where a lot of people think that motivation, it's like I have something in front of me and it's pulling me, and it's this active thing that I can just, if I have it, then I'll move forward, undoubtedly, because it's like taking me there. But in actuality, motivation is a result of an action that you take. And so motivation will continue to grow and that ball will continue to move more quickly, but you have to make the choice to take the first step. And it doesn't happen right after the first step, So I'm thinking about kind of the story that I was sharing about yoga and how that happened for me. And like for me in the beginning, it was just 5 to 10 minutes a day, just me getting on the mat until, again, the ball kept rolling. But I had to keep making that choice day in and day out. And it was almost like the same thing for a while. It wasn't, the choice didn't get easier right away. I had to, acknowledge this is what I want to do. And basically I felt kind of like separate from my body, like I'm deciding and I am moving my body there. And then eventually, after a few years, it was intuitive for me, where every single day I could give my body the release that it needed. And at that time, and even still now, because that's something I'm talking around something, but at that time I was recovering from a lot of trauma. And so right now I'm acknowledging that a lot of that trauma is still there for me. And so I'm managing like what my triggers are. But for the most part, like my point is that I'm acknowledging how my choices that relate to my health and my body really affect that. And it's just so interesting to see, again, just the different relationships between all of these things. And so like today I did get up a lot sooner because I had been talking to some friends about this concept, and I was like, struggling. They were saying there's this countdown method that Mel Robbins uses, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you just do it. And that's something that I used for like dishes and other things when I was really depressed, was this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule. And so there are all these tricks that you can use to help yourself, right, take that first step. And so while it is powerful to share stories about people who can make a decision and shift right away, I think for me, it's never been that easy. I always do do get the ball rolling, but I'm always like resisting for a while. And so I'm just noticing that resistance and using that resistance, I guess, as a tool, because I've been doing a lot of discovery, I guess, where I'm just noticing, like, what does this resistance feel like? And again, determining, like, is it resistance or is it just like tiredness? Do I need to give my body more rest? And sometimes you can have imbalances where you need to, again, recognize, like, maybe it isn't rest that I need. Maybe I'm feeling a little too stuck in a cocoon. Like, maybe it's time to break out. And then again, there's that like resistance that's like, no, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. And oftentimes you have to start things before you're ready. So I'm just going to wrap up with that. Let's take a little bit of a break. I'll see you back in just a couple minutes.
Are you looking to record or film your podcast? We have the sound room and all necessary equipment you need. Contact us for pricing and to schedule your tour.
Traditional TV is going away. Hollywood is starting to fade. People are demanding real stories from real people. Our voices are now being heard in our own way. Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok Live are becoming the norm. Internet TV has now reached the highest demand in human history. Social media shows is now the new media of the century.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the second segment of this episode of Mental Melodies. I'm your host, Carmynn Bradley. Thank you for tuning in and for listening. If you haven't been here before, thank you for tuning in for the first time. And if you're coming back, thank you for continuing to come back. Please just like and subscribe and share and all those things. And I just welcome comments and interactions, especially if what I've been sharing has been helping you in any way. That'd be helpful for me to hear or just interesting for me to hear. Yeah, so I was talking about healing as always. And I guess I stopped myself because I was feeling like a topic shift. And I was thinking about how a few weeks ago I was like, I'm going to talk about chakras. And then I had so many things pop up for me that I felt like inclined to share. Like last week I was very, very vulnerable. And so this week I kind of feel like I'm getting back on track. It was almost like the last 2 weeks with this giant sidebar. But there is value, in all of that. And especially I think in my story, and because the stuff that I talk about that I'm dealing with and that I'm, learning how to handle or how to manage, or even beyond that, like how to move past, everything has a story, and so knowing where I came from, I think really helps. And it helps to conceptualize these things where, if I'm arguing that many things do have a root in childhood trauma and there's value in going back there, then it's important for me to share what it is that I've healed from and how I've healed from it, because I think that's often the question, where it's like I can say you can heal from your childhood trauma by, and then you're like, okay, that's great, but now what do I do? Like, what steps do I take? I had a lot of clients that would ask me, like, can you just give me a book that tells me like how to heal from life? And I think this is the closest thing that I can do, is just share my story of how I'm healing. And I just have this continuous theme that pops up of just the imperfection in my journey. Like, I keep getting hit with these different tests. And I think there's so much beauty in that, because if I just hit a plateau and then I was great and I just kept moving forward in the same way, then life would get boring. And I'm kind of the person that doesn't really function well on boredom. I'm more of like a new adventure kind of lady. So this whole thing really, really works for me. So in talking about like losing the last year, in a sense, I didn't really lose it, but I just I wasn't quite at the level I wanted to be at, like I guess in the last few weeks, I'm starting to feel a little bit like I'm leaning a little bit too close to the, like, I'm just gonna settle back and like let my body be old. And I know that I'm not old, but this is kind of the decade where I think, at least in my generation, we all expected to kind of go downhill after 30, and that doesn't really make sense. But I think that you do have a choice, and so I could move a lot less, and I could just eat a lot more processed food, and I could start to see like my waistline grow, and I could be fine with that for the rest of my life and just like settle. And it's not even about the weight, but it's just like these are things that do happen when you start to let those decisions pile up, you know? And it is not even that you can't enjoy yourself. I went to a beautiful little workshop at the place that I don't remember, with a presenter whose name I don't remember. But the point was, she was talking about oxidative stress. And I was just thinking about this before I started the episode, how her talk was very similar to talks that I have had about how emotions build up in your body. And so she's talking about it from her perspective as a nurse practitioner, saying like biologically, if you are eating these different things and you're putting a lot of stuff in your body and you're not moving and you're not stretching and all of this, like your body's going to build up what is called oxidative stress. And she didn't really give a very like good definition of oxidative stress. In fact, most of what she said was just, it was like a buildup of stuff in your body. So in the health and wellness world, you hear buzzwords like free radicals, you know, and take a lot of antioxidants and blah, blah, blah. And much of her solution was in products. And, you know, it's like we have this kind of cycle in America where we take in and then we take in more to remove our body of the stuff we're putting in us that we shouldn't be putting in us. And it's this constant cycle of like, I hope I can keep up with all the shit that I'm eating and like the stuff I'm seeing and all the stress that I'm under. And so again, I'm at a space where I feel like I know, and that workshop was so powerful for me, because I was like, there are so many little choices that I can make to make myself feel better, because I'm starting to feel like a little off. Like I've got rashes all over my body and like, you know, feeling kind of like nauseous because my body's not really working and I need things to like be flowing. And so that was kind of where I left off in the first segment, because I was thinking about, again, where I left off when I was talking about chakras, and I was kind of talking about the first and second chakra. So if you're just tuning in, chakras are just a way of understanding the energy centers in my body, in our body, and how they can get blocked and how they can work more effectively. And a lot of this is related to different like Eastern medicine, you know, so Chinese acupuncture views the body in a very similar way, where there are energetic channels. You know, if you've ever seen an acupuncture like chart, there are a bunch of lines drawn to different nerves and the pathways that are connected to your different organs. So like the acupuncturist is not just like sticking needles in you randomly. I think if that were the case, nobody would go visit one. They are doctors, and they know where to put the needle based off of your symptoms in order to clear your energy so that things can be flowing. Like if you think about it, if you have a headache, we're often describing our headaches as like there's a lot of pressure in my head. And so if there's a buildup of something like stress, inflammation in your head, then you're going to want to release that, you know, and that same idea applies all over your body. I referenced the untethered soul much in previous episodes, and I mentioned this one chapter, I think it was 4 or 5, where he talks about the heart. And he centers in on this idea, and he centers in on specifically the heart area as a place that can get closed and opened and closed and opened. And he talks about the power of like choosing to keep your heart open. And he talks about how you can do that. Like you can tune in intuitively and energetically to your heart center, and you can open it up if you need to open it up. And I remember arguing then that I was like, his chapter's a little bit limited because he only talks about the heart. And while that is valuable, you have many different energetic channels in your body that you need to pay attention to. So I had referenced the Eastern body, Western mind as well, which is a great tool, especially if you're looking into healing yourself, because it conceptualizes a lot of the psychological issues that we mention in Western medicine. And so that's like, we use the DSM-5 to diagnose people. We talk about depression and anxiety and all these different things. And these are all symptoms, right, of underlying issues. And we've categorized them so that we can understand them. And that's very, very helpful. But this book takes it and then also talks about the various traumas that can affect these specific energy channels in your body, and then how you can like heal from them. And I think even more than anything, that book is more about awareness, which if you think back to like when I had my friend Nate on the show and we were talking about the power of awareness, it's just so necessary for you to be able to bring something to the forefront in order to heal from it, right? You need to know why it happened. You need to know where it came from. And again, there's that balance of like, okay, now I know why, but what do I do with that, you know? And there's all these different techniques that you can use to heal from like that childhood trauma. But if you're just starting with your body, you can start to pay attention to like how your body feels in certain areas. And that's kind of where I was at with yoga at the very beginning, was just paying attention to my body in general and like all these different places that I felt like energy was stuck. And we talk a lot about the hips in yoga, you know, and like yoga teachers will say stuff like all of your emotion sits there. And again, it's this overgeneralization for sure, because not all of our emotion sits in our hips. And I'm not 100% certain if there's a lot of claims that yoga teachers make, because we have like 200 hours of training and then we're thrown into it, and so people are just throwing around all these facts that they learn about like, well, this specific emotion sits here and this one sits here, and maybe that's true and maybe that's not. I'll have to like look into that, but the point is that like it can sit anywhere. And I've talked about my journey with like being diagnosed with lupus, and then acknowledging and admitting in the last couple episodes that like this is like where I'm at right now. I need to acknowledge that this diagnosis is not a forever thing, even though that's what they told me, especially when I was a young kid. And it still might be a forever thing, you know, but I need to see it as something that I have control over and that I can change, rather than seeing it as a forever thing, because then like healing is never possible, you know. And if you think to like manifestation, that's that balance of knowing that like one day I'll get to a point where I won't have flare-ups, you know, like I won't have rashes all over my legs. I won't have this feeling of being stuck in my body, or like my GI system will work, you know, and it will work day in and day out, and I won't ever get back to that place where I'm like, man, I'm starting over again. But you have to allow for like life to kind of knock you down sometimes, again, to emphasize the point that like that's the ultimate like manifestation goal, to get to that point where I feel healthy every single day. But if I got there now and I didn't have anywhere to go from here, then I would have, for one thing, a lot less to talk about. And again, it would just be, I don't know, it would be more, I want to use the word heaven, but I'm like, maybe that is the goal. Maybe that is what I want. But it's just like not realistic, I guess, to expect that it all just goes away right away. And I think, at least for me, I've learned that so let me give you, I guess, the example of like the heart center. I was thinking to how I've been talking about grief a lot on this show, and I've been talking about my brother and my dog. My dog, like most recently. There are like two sides to each energy center, like the positive side and the negative side, I think you could say. So like your heart center is open to love, and when grief happens, your heart center usually closes. So it's like we can predict that at any given time, some of our energy centers are going to be affected. Like it's not just going to be open and flowing all of the time, even though, you know, I'm saying that's the goal. But I think it's always this like balance. And we talk about this in yoga. Like if you've ever done a balancing posture, like I used to say stuff like, make sure that you can feel like your big toe on the ground and rock back and forth. And what you notice in a balancing posture is that you're not 100% still. Even when I'm standing here, I'm not like 100% still. It's easier. But what you're learning about in yoga is that concept of like being able to put a little bit more pressure if you feel like you're being pushed this way, or put a little bit more pressure if you feel like you're being pushed that way. And the same concept happens in life, where if you feel like you're being like thrown to the side by something in life, then you have to be able to adjust to that. So if, for example, the passing of my dog affected my heart a lot of it, then I need to adjust to that, and I need to find a way to like accept what happened and open my heart up again to love, you know, and find new ways to find that love and positivity without getting stuck in like the sadness, you know. And so I'm just reminded of this a constant kind of theme that I bring up about meeting things like right when they come to you, because I do think, again, when I'm talking about these moments that I get stuck in, that like sometimes we do need to acknowledge that there almost is no other way. Sometimes we have to just like go through something. My friend Audrey said something like, go through the narrative to get through the end. And it's like, or you need to ride the wave till you hit the shore. Like sometimes that wave is really short and it's just one feeling of sadness, and sometimes that wave is like a few weeks of struggling and wondering and like trying to make plans and fighting yourself and all of this until you like wake up one day and it's a little bit easier. Like today was a little bit easier to get up. So anyway, let's take a little bit of a break and I'll see you back in just a couple minutes.
Hi, I'm Deacon T with Modern Word Ministries. It's great to be with you today. Just a short little promo for our show. Every Sunday morning we have service, and you can follow us at 10 a.m. Pacific time on modernwordministries.org. And if you missed us or you want to see some of our older messages, go ahead and check us out on socialmediashows.com every single morning at 9 a.m. It's a great way to kick off your day, get a little bit of the word in you, get something uplifting, get you started off on your way. You know, if you're looking for prayer or you need some help, reach out to us. If you go to our website, again, that's modernwordministries.org, you can interact with me via telephone, via DM, text message, whatever you want. I'll get right back to you. So if you need prayer, you need help, you just need somebody to talk to, Modern Word Ministries is here for you. We are your church in the community. So until you see you next time, be blessed, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. This is Joseph Skoda with Social Media Shows. Well, I thank all of you for your support through these last several years, and it's been a lot of fun. We've given people a voice they never had before. Now, Social Media Shows is always collaborating with our veterans to help them do things and help out the veterans who are struggling today. And we teamed up with GI Connections, connecting veterans with resources. So please consider helping and donating to this great cause, because we're always doing things for veterans. So GI Connections, Social Media Shows, and you is what makes the world a better place. Once again, Joseph Skoda, proud United States Air Force veteran.
Welcome back. This is Carmynn Bradley. We're in our third segment of this episode of Mental Melodies. Thank you so much for tuning in and just for listening to me get to talk about all these things that I think are really cool and interesting and life-altering and life-changing and beautiful. And there's just so much power, again, in healing, and also just in this idea that you can heal yourself. Like, that was a lot of what I was talking about last week, aside from like my own story and, you know, becoming this cool person that I like to be. It was also just about self-healing and the power that we have, I think, when we share our stories. Like, something popped up the other day for me where this guy was saying, like, your voice is powerful. Don't downgrade the fact that your story has power. And I think that everybody does, you know. I think that, like, back in the day when people sat around fires, like, music and stories in life was just that. It was raw. It was in the moment. You know, we've gotten away from that to the point where now, because we don't talk about things, this is why we have to have podcasts, so that the people who feel compelled to talk about things will inspire the other people to feel compelled to talk about things. It's like, I think we've gotten so ahead of ourselves, not ahead of ourselves, just like, I don't know, there's so much nonsense out there that just clouds the fact that, like, most of life is pretty simple, I think. I don't know, I'm rambling. I was feeling passionate about this morning because I was just thinking back on my journey to, like, becoming a musician and being able to sing. And there was just, like, all these, like, different seeds planted, and I was just thinking about it, and it was just really cool. Like, I don't know, imagining myself being, like, around a fire as an old lady, just, like, singing to my tribe or whatever, and thinking about the beauty and simplicity in, like, live music specifically, and how wonderful it is. It's like we've evolved, beyond that to where we have recording artists and we have, different ways that you can twist music and all of that, and you're adding technology into music. But I think for me, like, I love raw things, and I love like peeling away all of the layers and like getting to the nitty gritty. That's like a lot of what I talk about on this show is just being able to accept every single aspect of life. And so I was thinking about, like, the end of last segment, I was talking about sadness again, which I brought up a lot, and I brought up the power of Inside Out, like that Pixar film. And I truly believe that sadness is the key to like a lot of healing that needs to happen. Like, a lot of people need to bring up a lot of sadness, and they need to feel it, and they need to really ride that wave. And so, I guess when I'm thinking about my story, I'm talking about like me bringing up a lot of old stuff, a lot of old sadness, a lot of old fear, a lot of old rejection, and like doing yoga for many, 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 many hours a day. I used to do it for like 4 to 5 plus hours a day, and I was running a lot too. And I've mentioned that before, and I've mentioned how I was like getting rid of a lot of the old energy that was stuck. I'm talking about lupus and like joint pain, and I'm talking about emotions getting stuck in our body. I think it's like when I don't know if everybody has talked about this is why I'm putting on my little detective face, but I'm thinking about these like narratives that we hear about like fat cells being built, and this narrative that we're told, about how like your fat cells just start to grow, and essentially they just like stick anywhere that they want to. And one thing I wanted to bring up was that like everybody's body is different. So I imagine that if everybody's body is different in how they store fat, for example, which is just the physical example or metaphor for like what I'm talking about, is that I think that we would also have an individual way that our body would respond to stress. So again, to argue that point that like a lot of yoga teachers make, that like this one specific emotion sits here. It might be true that a lot of us feel anxiety in our belly, but it might also be true that some of us feel it in our shoulders, that maybe some of us feel fear in our feet. I don't know, I'm being silly, but like the point is that there's not one right recipe for you to heal from something, and there's not one way that your body is going to respond to stress. Like, it is a coincidence that Maria and I both have rashes when we are stressed. She was talking about that before the show. We're just on the same wavelength. However, like, there are other people I know who their stress affects them differently, and so really it's about, like I said, it's about that self-ownership. Like, my story is very powerful, not because it's a recipe for how everybody can heal, but I can give you key points, the path that I've taken and the choices that I've made and the things that I've done that have helped me. But to apply them to you is simply going to look different, So I think, like, I'm just reminded today of just that power of embodiment and how important it is to take care of your body, because I'm thinking about, like, so maybe I released a lot of stuff from the past, and then I came to 2022 or 2023, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty limber. I'm feeling pretty strong. I don't feel like I have a lot of stuff like stuck in me. I still have some childhood trauma to work through, but I'm feeling pretty good. And then life kind of hit me again, and that's what I've been really wrestling with. Is acknowledging the fact that, like, a lot of us have not only childhood trauma, but we also have adult trauma. We have young adult trauma, and then we have adult trauma. And it's like, if you don't ever go back and not erase, but change the way that your body perceives your memories from childhood, it's just going to keep building up. So again, this image of like, it could be building up in your body as fat cells, because the way that you deal with emotions is by stuffing it down with food. Or it could be building up in your body as, like an autoimmune disorder like I was diagnosed with, where you start to feel it like all in your joints. Again, it's just like individual. But a lot of us, I think, don't have the opportunity to like get caught up, and then life hits us again. And that's where we get something called complex PTSD, when people have childhood trauma and then because resources are not there for kids. They get thrown into foster care or something, and so they have this intense trauma, and then they can't keep a job because they never got the help that they needed, and so then they start to have like grown-up trauma, and then it leads to like drug addiction, and then there's more trauma. And there's a lot of people who are like starting over in their 40s because they simply never got the chance to sit with themselves and have that awareness, or to heal, or they didn't have the resources, and I had shared about my experience in college and how like I had a lot of stuff already building up in my body, like stuff I hadn't dealt with. That was an opportunity for me to deal with it. And I think there are a lot of resources on college campuses, but what I had shared was that specifically with mental health, there weren't that many. So when my body was losing itself, I was going crazy. I mentioned like migraines where I was losing my eyesight and like all these things that were happening as, like a very young adult. I had to go get medical help because obviously my body was hurting, but also partially because there were just not a lot of resources in the mental health field. So while I know that if I had been able to go that other direction, dealing with mental health like in therapy, and had there been more yoga on campus, like maybe yoga that was free or something, and just a lot of awareness and the incorporation of these healing things, then I think college could have been the place where like I shifted. But instead, college was the place where I actually just started to stuff down my childhood trauma instead with more experiences in college, and that's when eating disorders came up, so I'm dealing with I dealt with intense emotions at that time, and again, if I knew that they were not just the emotions of that day, but they were coming from like childhood, maybe I could have felt through it, maybe I could have like ridden the wave, but I wasn't able to at that time. That's not a part of my story. So instead, it took me until 2018 or something until I was like, okay, now I need to take all of this stuff that has built up in my body and in my psyche from childhood until now, and now I need to start healing from that. And by that time, I was 28 years old. So you can imagine like all of the stuff that I'm like working through. So the point I guess I'm trying to make now is that like, so I'm saying that back in 2022, I was feeling pretty good, and I felt like I had like cleared myself of a lot of the pain. Like I wasn't having rashes anymore. Like I was feeling pretty healthy. And then I went through this traumatic relationship, and things started to get triggered again, like from childhood, and I'm starting to feel unhealthy again through that time. And so I think it's not that we heal and then all of a sudden we're in the clear. We still have to be pretty aware and pretty cognizant of different things that we like tend to move toward and different ways that we cope. And like specifically for me, negative relationships that I would jump into to fill a void that I had or something like that, And so I feel like I'm very much like catching up and like catching my breath from the last couple of years. And there's just like this very strong, ambitious, like motivated part of me that was able to get my career in performance off the ground despite all the crazy stuff that was happening in my life. But now it's like, okay, now I feel like I'm looking around and I'm like, I feel like I'm kind of safe. Like I don't have to look around my shoulder anymore. I'm a little bit more settled. And so now how can I add health into my life in order to make sure that I don't build more up? Because what could happen, like I was mentioning earlier, is that like I could continue to make choices that I know are not super healthy for me, and I could continue to do that, and I could start to feel a little bit more fatigue and like start to use like more coffee or different things to get through the day, even though I might need more rest, and start ignoring my body's cues. And then I could get to 40 and I would have to start over again, or I would just continue to like, I don't know what the opposite is of, because I'm using this rolling the ball image for healing, where we're like pushing it forward, and like, you're pushing forward your ball because you're trying to create motivation. But there's also this, I don't know if it's a backwards moving ball. I'll have to come back to you on this image, but what happens when you get stuck and you settle, and then you, like, we use this term in our negative body image language where we say like you let yourself go. What is that image of letting yourself go? Like, I think maybe it's different for everybody, but obviously there's this balance, between giving yourself the chance to have pleasure in your life. You know, like you can still eat cake on your birthday kind of thing. I'm not saying that the best option for me right now is to like go back to when all I was doing was eating vegetables and I had very like strict rules. I'm in a point in my life where I've learned so much about healthy habits that I know that that's not the way to go. But the thing that you need to do if you are living life as a human being in this society is acknowledge that we are constantly taking things on, that we will experience another loss in our life. And so the best thing that we can do is to incorporate these practices so that we can feel every wave when it comes. Again, this is like just a reiterating foundational conclusion that I keep making of like really the best way to live life is to feel whatever comes up when it comes up, you know? So anyway, there's like a slew of different things that I need to explain about what that means for trauma and what I'm actually talking about. So let's take a break and I'll see you for our last segment in just a couple short minutes.
Yes. This old dude here is down in the 89101 with the pimps, hookers, and crackheads. I have the ass of a 16-year-old boy. So, get you some cheesecake. I had to watch porn at the office. They paid me to watch porn at the office. Up is down, black is white. Porn is good again! Full official name and title is Captain Chris Cookie Cook, the Cook County Chili Cook and comedic curmudgeon, captivating crowds from coast to coast.
Got Films is a full-service production company that provides motion picture quality content and production services for use in the film and TV industry. Looking for a seasoned crew, high-quality equipment, or other production services for your film, TV, commercial, corporate convention, sports, news, or interview project? Your search stops here. Some of our projects include NASCAR, American Restoration, Pawn Stars, Counting Cars, Top Chef, BattleBots, Forge and Fire, and Street Outlaws. We have also produced over 60 feature films and documentaries. We're ready for all your needs. Whatever your project, whatever your budget, big or small, Got Films got you. GotFilms.com.
Las Vegas, here we come!
I can't believe we're all moving to Vegas.
I know, right? It's a dream come true.
Wow, super creepy dude.
Mason, stop. I think he heard you.
What if someone walked up in the back of his semi?
She's gone. Someone took her.
Who's that creepy trucker?
What are you doing?
They call me Mother Trucker.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the last segment of this episode of Mental Melodies. I'm your host here, Carmynn Bradley, and I have been talking today about something that I do talk about frequently, but specifically about being able to combat like the stress that builds up in your body. And so I brought up a new concept today that sees like the same thing I talk about from a biological perspective, and it's called oxidative stress, right? And so essentially, if you are going through your life and you, let's say that you don't have any childhood trauma, or you don't have any PTSD, or you don't have any significant depression that you need to watch out for, or you don't have eating disorder stuff to look out for. I'm just like throwing out my mental illness resume to all of you. But if you are not somebody that has all of those things, but maybe you're just experiencing some physical symptoms, like your GI tract doesn't work as great as it could, or you're feeling a little more tired than you should, you want more energy, or like your skin doesn't look so great, then you have power over that. You have power to change that. And so I'm kind of in this place right now where I'm trying to take that back, because I was feeling those sort of symptoms, like too much fatigue, not a lot of energy at work. I'm not getting a lot of brain fog right now, which is great. That was a really bad symptom of lupus when I had it. And that was just terrible, because especially as an intellectual, to not be able to like understand what I was reading was really, really terrible for me. And so obviously there's so many things that I have cleared out from my body and my system and my psyche, to the point where I think I've mentioned that, I don't believe that I'll go back to spots that I was before. Like in acknowledging that I've been stuck in kind of a depression for the last few weeks, I also acknowledge like the beauty of being a part of like my little dog's life and then him leaving. There's also things that I could acknowledge that are valid, like February is actually the month that my brother died, so that anniversary will be coming up next week. Yeah, I think so. So it's those are things that your body does remember, it's like from a trauma perspective. Again, if we're talking about all of this and like how to heal and how your body is connected to like your mental illness. Here's another book for you called The Body Keeps the Score. They actually flashed that book at the end of, I don't remember if it was Smile. I think it was Smile. It was that horror movie, and it was basically about healing from your trauma, and it was metaphorical for that, and it was metaphorical representation of how your trauma like finds you. The ending I think is ironic, because I think that the message that the filmmakers were trying to get at was that like if you overcome shame and stuff, that you will be able to walk away from your trauma. There was another horror movie out that was about that also, that I think I might have mentioned before, the one about she was like a priestess or something, one of those exorcist movies, but I noticed that it was also just an allegory for the story that we have of overcoming trauma, like the power of shame and getting rid of toxic shame. And so I love that all of that is out, like in pop culture, but I think that a lot of people they just watch it as a horror movie, and maybe not really think about what it means for them or what it's supposed to mean. And that's the power of English teachers, right? Because we do that. We tell you how to analyze a movie so that you can think about it instead of enjoy it. But anyway, I think I think that I've made my point mostly, I guess, today, just about how important it is to not constantly, but just to every day, like make a practice of making your health a priority. So that's something, again, that I'm just like adding back onto my plate. So since you all know that I'm just experimenting with this life, I'm sure that you'll hear many updates about this project that I'm on in the upcoming weeks. But what I'm doing right now specifically, I guess, as like a habit change, is getting up right when I wake up. And today I didn't do that. Today was the day that I sort of did that. And the last few days I said I was going to, and I didn't. And today was better because I was in bed not as long, but I still didn't get up right when I woke up. And I have this thing where I'll stay up too late, and that's part of the problem. So like right when I woke up this morning, I didn't feel like I was fully rested. I think if I'm really following the plan that I want to follow, then I would get up no matter what, just what I used to do back when I was running a lot. But I'm always trying to find balance. And so I not only do I feel that I won't go back to certain periods that I've had in my life that were really dark. Like I will never be as depressed as I was after my brother died. I don't think I'll ever be fully agoraphobic again. I get to those places sometimes where I just don't want to leave the house. If you don't know what agoraphobic means, that lady in the I Am Sam movie where he's mentally declined and he has a daughter and they're trying to take the daughter away from him, and there's this lady that lives across from them that plays the piano and she never leaves her house. That's agoraphobia, and it's actually just as extreme as they make it look like in the movies, where I would go to work. I did go to work, but then I would come home and like I would order groceries and I would barely pop my head out the window to make sure I didn't have to talk to anybody and like slide my groceries inside. I would avoid text messages, avoid messes, like all of this. And so again, these are all these like crazy intense things things I had to heal from. And so now I'm on a very micro level of that. I talk about like micro and macro a lot on this show too. And it's like interesting because I'm going through the same struggles, and there can be a frustration in that where it's like, I thought I already learned this lesson. Like I've already started over before. I've already had to tell myself like get up and go to the gym or like value your body. But it's not as intense as it was. And that's the beauty of the healing process. Again, with this image of like getting the ball rolling. The ball is already rolling for me, and I have to give myself credit for that. I've been pretty consistent over the last year. But now it's like, okay, what level do I want to be at? Like, do I want to settle here on like I'm a one day a week workout kind of girl, and I basically eat whatever I want, and I feel kind of sick, but at least I'm like working out one day a week. That's not who I want to be. I want to be somebody who feels healthy and vibrant and young, and who can begin to say like age is just a mindset, and I can acknowledge like the power that my body has to heal and to get stronger and all of these things. And so what I was saying on that vein of like not going back, there are unhealthy ways that I did do this in the past, and there are also ways that I had to do it in order to combat what it was that I was going through. So I guess that's what I'm working through right now, is like not incorporating this in the same way that I used to, where it's like all encompassing, but finding a way to just add it into the already beautiful buffet that I have of things in my life that I'm focusing on. And so it's just for me right now, it's taking like negative habits and replacing them with positive ones. And so it's funny because the whole like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing came to me around that time that I was like running a lot and like really starting this ball with yoga. And so now it's like coming back to me again because my body knows, and my mind knows, and my spirit knows that I've done it before and that I'm capable of it, So sometimes again, it's just like giving yourself the grace to get through these moments until you're ready, but also sometimes you have to start before you're ready. So I'm just like, I keep going back and forth in my mind, but the gist of it is that like you have so much power, I think, to grow and to evolve. And there is always a danger, I think, of getting stuck in negative patterns, of getting stuck in things that make us feel comfortable. We want to be able to enjoy our life. And this is something that I learned a lot when I was really healing from an eating disorder, which is, I think I've mentioned this, that this is like the first thing I really had to do was heal from this, because my relationship with my body is everything. It's the foundation, and so I had to kind of let go of a lot of really rigid food rules and stuff back then, and I had to let myself just enjoy food and not think about it for a while. And so now I feel like I'm at a point where I can balance that, where like I can enjoy life, but I do need to be like stretching or figuring out how to have healthy habits so that it's not my whole identity anymore, but it is a key part of who I am, and it can be a key part of who I am so that I feel good, instead of just like doing what I want to do, but I feel good doing it. And I think that's such a valid desire. I'm sure everybody wants that, right? Like we all want to feel good. I think at the end of the day too, that is what not just mental illness, but negative habits. Like when I talked about the beginning of the episode, you can have stuff that people with eating disorders have. Like you can have disordered eating without having an eating disorder. You can have depressive symptoms without having major depressive disorder. So everybody has their different way of coping with things, whether it's like nicotine or weed or coffee or eating too many cookies or starving yourself or watching too much TV. It's like all these things in excess are negative, and we all have ways that we cope. And so at the end of the day, like we have to find ways to feel our emotions a little bit more so that we can stop like stuffing them down. How do we get to a point where we can feel them, and that's where things like therapy come into play, because sometimes the emotions that we have to pull up from childhood trauma, for example, are too intense to feel on our own. Like there were some feelings that I was having that like I had thought that I had healed from that came up again after my dog died, that were very, very dark, and I felt like I couldn't really go through those on my own. So there's, just so much to be said about the power of therapists and about the power of like empathetic people in your life, because I think that while a lot of the healing that I've done has been on my own and has been very internal, there also has been a lot of support, and I think people need that. And I think that without that, a lot of the healing that we can have is lost. And so that's just like, I guess, an appeal that I have out to the world so that more people can be open, so that people have space to like feel these things they need to feel, all of that. But I don't know, I guess here's my PSA for this week. Take care of yourself. Examine like the habits that you have and maybe like try to pick one. I've talked about how like when you want to start habits, it's best to just pick one. Like there are so many different things I want to change about my health right now, but right now the big thing is just getting up in the morning. So next week I'll let you know how many days I get up right when I wake up, and then you can give me some gold stars. I will see you all in a week. Lost, lonely, or maybe even a little bit loony? I talk about these things on my show and how to help them. Mental Melodies, broadcasting live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m.